Well, that was great. I just relived my high school years. How was it for you?
Yeah. I think it holds up pretty well. There's some odd hair moments and things, but
It was the 80s.
Yeah.
It's okay.
Yeah.
By and large, nothing to be embarrassed about. I love there's so much about this film, but I love the enthusiasm, the crazy energy on stage, and everyone's happy, having a great time. Was it really like that for the whole tour, or is this just like a special energy drink moment for the movie?
No, the tour went really well. It was very well received.
Yeah. But for you guys, were you always just that happy, joyful?
Once we got maybe after the first week or so of shows, it took a while to get it all the timings up, and we did a lot of rehearsing and to get those set pieces to slide out at the right moment and all that kind of stuff. Yeah, once that was all done, we were kind of ecstatic that it was actually working. And that the audience wasn't reacting in the beginning going, "Where's the band?"
Oh. What came first, like the idea of the theatricalness of the concert, or the idea to make a film so you made the concert more theatrically staged?
No, it started off as the concert, to make a more theatrical concert. And it seemed like a really super obvious idea to start with an empty stage and show how a concert gets made, technically, bring out all the parts, all the players, and all the lights and the gear, and then do it. Show what that stuff does.
Yeah, it looks beautiful. And I also want to ask you, before I let the eager audience get a crack at it, I noticed you had a credit for the lighting design. How involved were you in the production of the film? Did you do more?
Well, I hung around, but there was kind of there was two levels of lighting design. There was the lighting design for the live show, which I kind of storyboarded the whole thing, not minute, not second by second, but song by song. So I had a kind of little drawing with a kind of lighting idea for each song, and then I went to this woman, Beverly Emmons, who's credited, and I'd seen her work that she'd done with Bob Wilson, the theater director, he's extraordinary with light, but she kind of implemented it. So I went to her and I said, "Listen, I have these ideas of things I want to do. Maybe you can tell me how this can be achieved, and you might have some additional ideas so we can take it further." So that was done, and then it was the whole film process of how to translate what your eye sees on stage to getting that same effect on celluloid. And the director of photography was this guy, Jordan Cronenweth, who had done Blade Runner and all these movies. It was just like, incredible. So I would sit there every day with him, and he would, with guys with light meters and all this kind of stuff, would kind of adjust the lights for the show so that it would look to film the way it does to the eye. Does that make any sense? Because for instance, if you just shot the show as it was without making those adjustments, the bright parts of the show would be too bright and they would just overexpose, and you just get washed out people and washed out parts of the thing, and the dark parts would be too dark and you wouldn't see anything. So the thing was to bring down the brights, bring up the dark stuff, so that it looks to celluloid what you're seeing when you're in there in the audience.
It's a lot of work, but it paid off.
It's a lot of work. It was going
film.
through every light cue.
Yeah. Did you go to Jonathan Demme with the idea to make the film, or did he come to you?
I went
Did
to
you know each other beforehand?
I didn't know him. We had a mutual friend and who introduced us, and I was a big fan particularly of his movie Melvin and Howard. That was the movie he'd made just prior to that, and it's really great. he was having his personal nightmare during the shooting of Stop Making Sense. He had done a movie. He'd had done kind of these smaller indie movies, kind of in with smaller studios, and done beautiful work. And he was doing his first really big budget studio movie called Swing Shift, and with Goldie Hawn and some studio. And apparently it went bad. They wanted him to recut it, and all that kind of stuff that you read about. So he was going through the kind of ground zero nightmare of life at the same time that he was shooting this. So I think it was really good for him to come out of it and going like, oh, but I can do this.
I'm sure it lifted his spirits a lot.
Yes.
It did for all of us. Okay, who would like to start with a question out here? You're right here in the front row.
Are kind of not quite 9 to 5, but sort of like that. And I'll go into songwriting mode, like when I'm on tour and performing. I'm maybe soaking up things, but I'm not really writing anything. And then I'll take a break and write, and I'll write for like a book writer would do. I'll write for a certain number of hours a day, and that's kind of as much as I can get of writing. And then there might be hours of kind of the mundane stuff, like fixing a guitar part or something like that. And yeah, in more recent years, you can kind of do demos and write at home on a laptop or a computer or something. So I'll do that, and I'll do that for months until I feel like I've got stuff. But it changes all the time. Some of the material was written in collaboration with the other band members. Some of it was written individually. Yeah, it varies a lot.
Are you writing now? Are you in a writing phase now?
Yeah,
Soaking up phase.
Writing something today. I think it might be. I got like halfway through a song, I think. So tomorrow I'll listen to it and see if I think it's good or if I think, oh, nope. I was drawing on a lot of different things. Probably not surprisingly, I was drawing on Pentecostal church stuff, that kind of movement, ecstatic things. Not just in Pentecostal church, but you can go into Haiti or Brazil or Cuba or wherever. All those kind of religious traditions. I was drawing on that. I felt like a lot of pop music concerts are kind of a secular version of that same thing, which is not a new idea, but I thought, oh, okay. That's why some of the same choreography and gestures and the same things work and are used over and over again in pop music cultures, because they come out of this a kind of sacred tradition, and then they're turned into a secular thing. I was drawing on kind of the New York downtown avant-garde theater a little bit. As I said, the woman who helped me do the lights was a woman who'd worked with Bob Wilson. There's a credit to Joanne Akalitis, who's a member of Mabu Minds, the theater group at the time, and she came and watched some of our rehearsals and gave me notes. But as well as that, I was kind of very excited and informed by a lot of the New York downtown theater stuff, which was not naturalistic in any way, shape, or form. And I thought, well, that works for a pop concert too. We're not trying to pretend we're in a living room or that we have a set of a bar and we're all pretending like we're somewhere else. We're accepting the artificiality of us being on stage, and our gestures and everything else like that are very artificial and have no relationship to kind of mundane, normal life. We're not trying to imitate that. And then going along with that, I saw a connection between that kind of theater and a lot of Eastern theater, like Eastern as in Japan or Indonesia or Bali or other places, where it's in no way naturalistic, and it's more what's called presentational, where you're presenting something to the audience. There's no pretense that you're, again, in a living room or anything like that. You turn right to the audience and you can wear big suits or whatever, which was probably in some way, in part inspired by No costume, the No dramas of Japan, which have these big oversized costumes that are in a similar way, they're very kind of flat, they're one-sided. They're meant to be seen from the front, and if you turn sideways, it's kind of like, whoop, where'd he go?
Like a playing card.
Yes,
Yeah.
like a playing card.
Right here.
Oh, I don't even know where it is now. I think it, well, no, I mean, it was on, there was some kind of art exhibit at the V&A in London called Postmodernism. And it was in that, and that show may have traveled somewhere else. So that's maybe where it's doing its own tour, yeah. Wow. Well, like I said, I think it holds up pretty well. You notice, I mean, I tend to notice, you guys probably do too, some of the stuff that is a little bit dated, but hopefully that kind of, you can kind of go like, oh, okay. Let that go, and it's fun or exciting or something, despite the dated touches. Yeah, it's probably not good. I'm too close to it, so I'm looking at, I'm looking at everything. I'm looking at the where the camera cut, where the film is cut, the way the camera covers a particular moment, and I go, well, that's brilliant, or that could have been maybe a little better, or whatever. But yeah, I mean, my point of view is far from distanced.
The music holds up, even if some of the hairstyles were dated. The music is not. I think
good.
It's just right, perfect.
No, the explosion of joy is real. And I mean, we're having fun as a band, but it's coming from the audience too. If it wasn't, we're really, totally feeding off the audience reaction. And when we start getting a good reaction at, say, the beginning of the show or something, it just feeds itself. Wow. I had a little bit of a discipline, I would do stretches, things like that before the show. There was a point where I tried doing vocal warm-ups, and then I think maybe I gave up on that. Yeah, and I mean, there's always an opportunity to kind of to party and hang out and kind of exhaust yourself. And I probably did that sometimes, but then eventually you realize, that's going to take its toll. I can't do that, or I can only do it every so often. and you realize, okay, no, I have to go to sleep now. Yeah.
It was shot over
Well,
three
yeah,
three
the
nights for one thing,
Sorry,
right?
the cameras can catch everything because by that point in the tour, it was there wasn't a whole lot of variation. A lot of the improvised moments, there were moments that look improvised, they kind of got set after a while. They'd come into being as something that was improvised. In rehearsals or in the early parts of a tour, and then you go, that's really good. That feels perfect. You know what you're doing, what you're doing with this other person, or a particular interaction that's happening. That feels perfect at that particular moment. Keep that. Keep doing that. And if it emerges, I found that if it emerges organically that way, it's really easy for it to just keep happening. It doesn't feel like, oh, do this step that I'm going to teach you how to do, which that can work too. But in this case, it was all it all emerged more or less organically, and then would get set as like, keep doing that. So, I don't know, hope this isn't too disappointing, but by that point, yes, almost the 4 nights, almost the same thing would happen every night. The same interactions. I discovered that although that sounds like, oh, there's no feeling or it's just rote. You're just going through a routine and moves and looks and everything that you've worked out. If it works well, then the feeling is still there. If it's kind of false, then it kind of starts to fall apart.
Have you all seen the David Byrne, interviewing David Byrne 5-minute video made, around this time, right?
Yeah, it was,
Yeah.
It was a little fake interview done when this came out. And I thought that by doing this little, video piece, I could avoid a lot of the most obvious questions.
I was watching it before this afternoon. I thought maybe I should repeat some of those same questions to you to see. But I didn't.
And I thought I could deflect them by doing this interview where I get interviewed by myself and all these different characters, and it didn't work. I also thought that by doing this, what I thought was a kind of innovative little piece, that the various outlets, MTV at that time or whatever, that they would run that and I could avoid having to do an interview with MTV. They say, no, you don't have to talk to me. I'm going to give you this very cool thing that you can run. And that didn't work either.
Well, a lot of those questions you said you just answered them later. You said, I'll tell you later. That was your
Yes,
answer
there was
to a
a
lot
lot
of
of,
them. So
"I'll tell
they
you later."
really wanted you to come back.
I have to think that it was well recorded, that was part of it. I think it was at the suggestion of one of the producers, a guy named Gary Getzman, who now works on a company called Playtone. He's a movie producer now, and he suggested we try this thing called digital recording, which was very new at the time, and of course there was it was digital multi-track recording. This was not recording on laptops or computers. But theoretically, at least, it meant that as one has to do when you're doing a film, you go through, the recording goes through multiple generations. It goes through the initial recording, and then it has to go to a master recording that is that matches the edit and has only the songs that you're going to use in it. And then it has to probably that gets edited again and mixed down or submixed into something else. And it goes through multiple generations. And normally, and with analog tape, when it does that, as nice as analog sounds, when it goes through a certain number of generations, it starts to degrade, and you start to hear, it starts to get duller sounding or whatever. Not always, but it can do that. And the idea was, theoretically, that this would avoid that. That, as with digital things, the idea was that every time it went through another generation, it would be exactly identical to the previous one, and there'd be no loss. I'm sure that's not true, especially of the technology at that time. But I think it did maintain a lot of the audio quality, and we were kind of obsessive about it. And yikes, yeah. I mean, when it was relatively new at the time. It was kind of a nightmare trying to figure it all out, but I think it paid off.
Yeah. We just watched a DCP, digital, of the original film, but you might not know the answer to this, but do you know why the changeover cue marks were included in the DCP? By any, I'm sitting here watching things.
Oh, you mean those little things that go?
The little circles that tell the projectionist when to switch.
Put on the next reel.
Yeah, there's.
Wow.
I was like, well, they're still there. Like, they try to preserve the feel of film. I don't know.
There's the obvious narrative of, that you see a more or less empty stage, and that you see the band being created, and you see all the lighting coming in and the projectors and everything else. So you see there's the arc of a stage show being created, and then the last half, you see that show being put into action. But I think there's another, I sensed that there was another one. There was kind of this psychological narrative with me, starting off as this very twitchy person alone on a stage, or alone in the world, or what, Mr. Psycho Killer, alone, and very twitchy and alone and angsty. And then gradually, over the course of with the music and with the help of all these other people, the band members and singers and everybody else, who begin to surround me, this kind of angsty guy kind of lets go and is kind of liberated. It's a whole, catharsis thing. And I realized, you get that too. You don't get, there's a whole psychological arc as well as the arc of seeing the show being created. That's what at least that's my take on it. What gets me into the criticism? I usually have to have an assignment, and it could be an assignment that I give myself, which could be I'm going to collaborate with another musician. So that's the assignment. I have to figure out how to work with them, how to adapt what I do to what they do, or it could be for a project like a theater project, or sometimes a record of songs. But often I try and have something where I go, this is your job, this is what you have to do, and it has to do this, and it has to do this, and that kind of motivates me, that kind of gets me going. If I just sat there and thought, oh, you can do anything, you can write anything you want, about anything you want, I think I'd be paralyzed. I think probably like a lot of people, I soak up a lot of stuff, whether it's from films or other stage shows. I had to go out of town, but I'm really sorry I missed the Katy Perry show. It sounded like a spectacle way, way, way beyond my reach of anything I could ever hope to do, just in the realm of like stage stuff and spectacles and stuff flying through the air and costume changes and everything else. And I thought, oh, I would never, think that I could or would want to do all that, but there might be like something that would kind of spark an idea and go, oh, there might be something that I go, oh, I didn't think of that, but maybe I can do that my way instead of in kind of that the pop show kind of way. But I missed that. I'm sure it'll be out on DVD. Wow. There was very, very little re-recording as far as like overdubbing and fixing stuff. There was some, but not that much. Kind of surprising because the technology was not that you could kind of fix things like retune a vocal the way you can now. So it was kind of surprising how little of that we did. The editing process was really kind of bizarre and curious. The director, Hal Ashby, who has done these incredible movies, he had done, I don't know what it was, he'd done some kind of music movie. It might have been a Rolling Stones movie, or it was something.
Let's spend the night together.
Let's spend the night together. So a Rolling Stones concert thing. So when he did that, he had the idea that, wow, this sounds really complicated, but okay, that everything we got shot on film, then transferred to, I think it was beta or VHS style cassettes, so that and then everything sunk up. So that, for instance, on day one, if there were 4 cameras shooting on day one, those would be on 4 different video cassettes. Day 2 would be on 4 more video cassettes, and day 3 on 4 more video cassettes. And if they all ran on the same sync, time code and were kind of sunk up, not that we played the songs at exactly the same tempo, but more or less, they could be made to run all together, which is, so you could roll kind of a dozen video cassettes all at the same time and go, okay, look, we can see what every camera during the whole 3 or 4 day shoot was getting at that particular moment, more or less, give or take, a second or two, which was really great for editing. I mean, otherwise you have to go through all the bins and look at all the stuff. So this was a very kind of innovative way of doing a music thing. It wouldn't necessarily work for a fiction film. But it meant that you could go, that's the best shot. That shot captures that moment better than any other shot. And then there's the whole question of getting it in sync. The band would probably choose which audio recording was the best for each song out of each day. And then they would try and get the film to sync with that as much as possible, even though it was shot on different days. But like I said, we kind of did the same thing every show. So physically, at least, I mean, my lip sync might have gone off in some cases, but luckily the cameras sometimes were going around behind me, so they could kind of cheat that if it was from a different day. That was a lot of explanation there, more than probably anybody needs to know. But
sounds like a lot of work.
yes, nowadays it's absolutely not necessary to have a dozen video cassettes running. After the records we did with Brian Eno, I think we weren't kind of trying to kind of scoop up little bits of things that he'd done with other people as much. We were working with other people, but we had already by that point become accustomed to this way of writing where the whole band would go in the studio and kind of jam, and then we'd kind of pick the best of those moments and kind of cut and paste stuff together and build tracks that way. Or in some cases, I think on that record, on Speaking in Tongues, we would rehearse this, do the jams at home, and then I would take those little cassettes to my house and go, okay, that moment, followed by that moment, followed by that moment. Let's learn how to do that, and that's what we would take into the studio and then write words and melodies and stuff over that. But and some of that is the confidence that we had to do that. I think some of that came from Brian Eno. He kind of pushed us to say, "Yeah, you can do this. You can." And by doing this, you sometimes will come up with something that you would never come up with if you just sat with a guitar or a keyboard or something like it and do it, which is absolutely true. But it also means that there's other things that you also would never come up with doing it that way. I see someone lurking.
There's someone lurking over there, but one quick question. It's a good lurker. Could you ever consider doing another concert film?
Oh, I did a few after this. I did one where I had this very large, some years later, where I had a very large Latin funk band. With a big brass section and Latin percussion and everything. I did one like that, and I did one a few years ago where I had a bunch of dancers incorporated into the show. Myself and the singers and the dancers, it was a lot of choreography and jumping and stuff going on. I did that too. None of them were like this.
No.
Which is probably good in
it's
some
okay.
ways and maybe disappointing in other ways.
Some things don't need to be repeated.
Yeah.
So thank you very much for coming here tonight.
Thank you.